there's a sign, or some signs, that I think from Trump's point of view, he's beginning to lose a bit of patience. Now, we've been here before, and it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to have a different approach, but it may be that what's going on with tankers and oil and trying to deal with sanctioned supplies of oil with Iran and with Russia and with Venezuela, Cuba, is part of a broader process of putting a bit of pressure of a different nature to the military kind that we've all been talking about over Ukraine on the Kremlin.
It's been an extraordinary week, as we've been talking about, for America and the world, shaking the foundations of the international order. As we've been discussing, the US has seized a Russian-flagged oil tanker in the Atlantic Ocean. It's the latest demonstration of US military power, reach and audacity. President Trump has also said the US could be Venezuela's overlord for years. The US has captured the country's de facto leader while not putting boots on the ground to control the aftermath. And the White House has said it is actively discussing putting in a bid to buy Greenland from Denmark. So, what will be the impact of this bullish foreign policy approach? Sir Peter Westmacott, former ambassador to the United States, is with me now. Thank you very much for joining us, Sir Peter. So, how do you summarise all of this? Let's start with these skirmishes between Russia and the Americans on these oil boats. Is this as dangerous as it sounds?
It's probably not as dangerous as it sounds, but it may be part of a different approach to the relationship with Putin on the part of President Trump. For a long time, those of us who care about the freedom of Ukraine and European security have been quite worried, I think, about the way in which Trump has handled Putin and Russia. And on the whole, he's been disposed to give Putin the benefit of the doubt. And every now and again, when he talks about taking a firmer line, it turns out that he doesn't really mean it. But in the last few days, we've seen that he's begun to get fed up, not for the first time. He's talked about Putin killing too many people, and that's a bad idea, and he's frustrated about it. And he didn't much like, it seems, being lied to about the alleged drone attack on Putin's residence, which he was initially disposed to believe because it came from Putin, and then he was told by the agencies that it was a pack of lies. He didn't like that. And there's a sign, or some signs, that I think from Trump's point of view, he's beginning to lose a bit of patience. Now, we've been here before, and it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to have a different approach, but it may be that what's going on with tankers and oil and trying to deal with sanctioned supplies of oil with Iran and with Russia and with Venezuela, Cuba, is part of a broader process of putting a bit of pressure of a different nature to the military kind that we've all been talking about over Ukraine on the Kremlin. Now, it's not yet clear whether that's what it means, and I'm not quite clear whether the sanctions which these tankers have been breaking are in fact purely American sanctions or international sanctions or European sanctions. The British government obviously decided that, having taken a firm line on Greenland with its European allies, it was going to support the Americans in taking possession of that tanker, large tanker, north of the United Kingdom in the North Atlantic. So we presumably have satisfied ourselves that it's a legal thing to do. And I suspect that we're pleased to be reinforcing sanctions action against those countries which have been trading in oil, contrary to both our national interest and to international sanctions. That's Iran, it's Cuba, it's Venezuela, and it may well be Russia as well. So I think there's several moving parts at the moment, and it just may be that in the White House there is a different view coming through as to how Trump wants to deal with his hitherto friend Vladimir Putin.
That's important, of course, but I suppose another element is we're also probably quite happy to be involving ourselves together with the United States regime at a time when our relationship with them is so uncertain. How do you describe the relationship that now exists? We've got a United States and Britain that were both committed to an international liberal order, if you want to put it that way, which a commitment which certainly doesn't exist now on the US side, but still exists on the British side. And yet we aren't really in a position to separate ourselves up from a country that influences us so much economically and particularly in terms of security. So how does one play that relationship?
Well, I think you're right that our talk hitherto of shared values and respect for rule of law and human rights and democracy, rules-based international order, that's largely kind of parked while we've got Donald Trump in the Oval Office. He doesn't seem to be interested in any of those things. And as we've just been talking about with Tim Marshall, what's going on in Venezuela seems to be a great deal to do with oil rather than any of those principles or illegitimacy or democracy or anything else. So I think you're right that the fundamentals of our important relationship with our most important military ally, United States, are no longer the same. I think on the issue of Greenland, we decided that there was no choice but to take a firm line because the idea of invading or helping yourself to a very important part of a very important ally in NATO was a bridge too far. But I think partly because of that is why I think the Ministry of Defence was pretty keen to help take possession of that sanctions-busting tanker. How do you deal with it? Well, generally speaking, the UK approach has been, if we're going to have an influence on the White House, and it's not just with the Trump White House, it's true of the other ones, it is best to try to influence people in private rather than to call people out in public. That's different to the approach that some other European countries have taken. It doesn't always work, but it has been the approach. It does mean that the UK tends to get pretty good access to the decision makers. And I think at the moment when the normal process of government, normal machinery of government in Washington isn't really functioning, but everything is decided either on a whim or by half a dozen people talking to the president or what he's decided he wants to do in the middle of the night, it's all more important to have those private relationships with the key players. And we know that with a somewhat vengeful and unforgiving president, that if you do start getting into a shouting match in public, it's not likely to end well. And as long as the United States remains a very important ally for us in terms of helping secure European defense, I don't think we can afford to alienate that ally.
Can I just have, as one last thing, one final piece of advice that you give to your successor, the new British ambassador to the United States?
Do not worry too much about trying to make friends with Donald Trump. That's the Prime Minister's job. But make absolutely sure that you've got good personal relations with the, let's say, 10 people around him who are critical to the policy-making process. That's the fundamental thing that matters.
Well, Sir Peter Westmacott, former British ambassador to the United States, I'm sure that will be very valuable to your successor, and your advice has been very valuable to us. So thank you very much indeed.